Well, Robert, I'm very curious about the origin of the lecture or the sermon. Where did it come from?
Thanks for asking, Craig. So my job is I teach college classes, and one of my favorite classes to teach is called Exploring the Planets. And um, every once in a while, I'll end up with a free week at the end of the semester. And yeah, I kind of just said, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. And I was like, oh, I need to talk about aliens, and I need to tell these students what's really worth talking about and what's worth learning about. And so that, or like, if I want to talk about them, what am I going to actually say to them? What am I going to actually stand on? Um, and I think the my most favorite thing to talk about when it comes to aliens is the Fermi paradox. If someone hasn't learned about it, that's like the place to begin because it's a very straightforward sort of what's the right um, that's a paradox, but like just a little mind game to ask oneself, given the data that exists about our galaxy and just how many planets are out there and just how much time there has existed, begs the question of where are all the aliens. And usually I've enjoyed sort of just hitting my students with that, and they usually are pretty open mouthed. Um, and then the more and more I've taught it, the more and more I've reflected on it. Usually after I've given the lecture, like, now do I really? What do I really think about X, or what do I really think about Y? And um, so this lecture is sort of the I think I've taught that class maybe like 10 or 11 times now. And so I've gotten to that section on astrobiology and search for life in the universe. And I've always sort of maybe tweaked it and tweaked it a little bit. And then it started to really sort of go into the spiritual and uh, the uh, conspiratorial realm where I think because I started to include some more recent news about unidentified aerial phenomena because that was sort of in the news. There was government hearings, and so I can't just be up there lecturing about the science of it all and not bring in what's happening. Um, and so I just started to experience sort of more convergence around, hey, there might be actually something here to share with my church. And that's sort of what led to the lecture. My church did a series of summer lectures last summer. And I was like, I'm either going to talk about this or Bitcoin. And I think this one's more ripe. So
What's
that's
that
the origins.
paradox you talked about? I don't.
Yeah, so it's the Fermi paradox, and sort of it's described in that first part of the lecture. Just to summarize it, basically, um, our galaxy is old enough, 4.5 billion planets in the galaxy. Just from the little that we have observed, we've just been like finding planets um, by the boatloads. And many of them tend to be a really great distance away from their host star to host water. Now, a certain fraction of them aren't going to be suitable for life, but we've only looked this much and we're seeing so many planets. And so just kind of take the take the extrapolation forward, and the conservative estimate is actually 100 million planets similar to Earth. And so you've got time. you've got space. If life is a common feature in the natural world, in the natural universe, then there should be aliens. And the question is where are they?
What's paradoxical?
It is the logical conclusion without an empirical sort of like support for it. Like, so the line of reasoning sort of comes to this like aliens exist, but yet we have no evidence of that.
Yeah, I wonder if that may not be technically a paradox, but it's certainly called that popularly. Robert, I'm really curious. You know, this is a pretty out there topic. I've never heard anything like this delivered to a congregation. I wonder which which aspects of your lecture you think will be, you know, widely accepted and which will be, you know, a little more controversial or exotic.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna try to leave it up to them and be as open-handed with it as possible. I had a conversation with my pastor today. We met for drinks and talked over the document. And I think what I walked away from was that a large part at the end, I sort of start to reflect on my experiences as a college instructor. And the first half is a lot of like, okay, let's talk about the science and share the observations that we have gained from space. Then it goes into this um, sort of like this theological argument for why conspiracy theories aren't in aligned with a Christian worldview. Um, and after talking to him, I really sort of realized that I was approaching that theological part in a very academic sense. I would like have this like quote from a Christian scholar, and then followed up by one or two scriptural references, and then like a concluding statement. I did like four of those, and that's just very academic to approach it in that sense. Um, and what I realized is like that's a great way to alienate my audience. And so
Choice of
instead,
words.
oh yeah, great. And and so I'm going to invert the lecture. I'm actually going to start with my personal experiences and how that has made me feel as an instructor and what I've wanted for my students and what I see happening in the world. And then I will sort of like draw the audience towards the science and the beauty that is there. And then like kind of swing the pendulum back towards like, here we are with this world full of misinformation and disinformation and pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. Like, how do we grapple with these two extremely yeah, these two different end members? And I think the way of Christ is always the way through the middle. It's the narrow path between both of those extremes. So yeah, so we'll find. I'll have to do a lot of editing, but it'll end up somewhere. Trying to plot a course through the middle. Yeah.
It's interesting, Craig, that you anticipate, or maybe I just made that implicit to your question, that you anticipate controversy in something like this. I remember even my children's pastor would talk about aliens to me, when I was a kid, and he'd say, if God's a creative God and he's always been there, what in the world would we think there weren't more, and things like this. But increasingly, when I hear Christians talking about aliens just in these rabbit hole documentaries that YouTube keeps feeding me, it's always in the context of like demons and angels. Does that figure into any of what you'll be talking about, Robert?
No, I'm not really. I'm not a scholar in biblical creatures. I think there's a title for that term, like the different creatures that show up in different mythology or scripture. I have a friend at the university. She did her dissertation on all of the different weird animals that showed up in the iconography during the Dark Ages. And so there's people that study that stuff, and I'm not it. But I think what I will mention is that I think so there's the quote from C.S. Lewis that like the over obsession in this stuff or the complete abject denial and rejection of it, both of those are wrong. Both of those are not proper paths forward. And in the Screw Tape Letters, it says that that demons delight in both of those. And so I see a little bit of that in my spaces, like from my colleagues who are good scientists. Professionally, they have to flat out reject any notion of aliens because usually it doesn't lead towards testable hypotheses. And so I respect that, but hey, we can all still believe in our personal lives. We just don't have to don't have to spend taxpayer dollars on this stuff. And then on the other end, like I've talked to some friends and they also see, like they'll share curiosity with like a family member and they're like, no, like we're not supposed to think about those things or be curious about aliens. Like all of that stuff is a part of the occult. It's dangerous, it's wrong. And so like I think both of those sort of miss the mark, or exclude themselves from a fuller and more beautiful sort of picture. And so yeah, I mean, I don't really have any sort of theological or scriptural background to start to like try to draw a line of like, oh, well, those are demons and these are aliens. And like, there's crazy things in the Bible. Like there's Nephilim and crazy spinning orbs in Ezekiel. And I don't know what that stuff is, but it's in there.
Hey, you mentioned Lewis. Are you a space trilogy guy?
I started it. I liked the first one. I didn't get into the rest of it. But then you did mention another one by him, right? Rocketry or something.
That might
Someone
have
No,
been
did.
maybe
a
maybe
Stephen Reynolds
Steven. Yeah,
reference.
Steven did. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're. It's interesting too that you kind of went in the route of. Um, it sounds like aliens is almost just like the launch pad to get into the how Christians should respond to conspiracy theories. And
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think my lecture or my notes or my thoughts on any of this give any sort of like definitive or insight into the existence of aliens or not.
are
What my
the
my I guess what I'm trying to say is my hope is like that the conversation or the discussion or the lecture could actually help us inform a little bit more about ourselves.
mhm.
Yeah.
Is the criteria that a Christian would use? I wonder if there's any big difference between the criteria anyone would use to assess whether or not a given, because I don't think we would. I mean, obviously there's a negative connotation, and that's probably not the wrong connotation for conspiracy theories to have. But if you just take them at face value, this is a theory that there might be a conspiracy. We know that conspiracies exist and we can theorize about them. Or has conspiracy theory sort of transcended any kind of neutrality? It's just always when you talk about it negatively connoted. I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah, I guess your question is are conspiracy theories always uh bad or always
yeah, I guess it's
improper?
a it's a point of clarification on the language we're using. Or when we're talking about them, are we saying what we mean by conspiracy theory is just obviously crazy things that there's like a mind virus about we can't help believe, or is it just when we suspect there might be a conspiracy out there that we're that's being covered up nefariously. Because, I mean, it seems like the criteria would be the same for Christians and non-Christians alike. You assess the credibility of the people telling you about it. You'd assess the evidence that they brought forward, etc.
I appreciate your question, because like what is a conspiracy theory? I think is what you're asking, and can Christians and non-Christians agree on what it is? Can they have the same definition for that? And I think they can. I think some of the hallmarks when I think of a conspiracy theory is that it is the it's usually not built off of evidence. There might be a little bit of evidence, but the line of questioning usually goes towards suspicion and doubt, rather than sort of questions that are answerable. So, yeah, so the conspiracy theory. So let's take a step back. I can propose a theory. It doesn't mean that the theory is testable. And so I can propose all kinds of theories. It doesn't mean that all of them are testable. And I think in conspiracy theories, there are a lot of ideas that get put out there that aren't answerable. And that indicates to me that the purpose might actually just be to spread suspicion, fear, and doubt more than
Hmm.
actually getting to answers.
Well, I wonder if you think of like some famous conspiracy theories. If you think of like Pizzagate, and you're like, okay, there's some bad stuff going on in this pizza parlor. Now I'm gonna test it by busting in the door with my automatic. So I mean, sometimes they're clearly testable. Um, I mean, and you got to imagine that they're coming from a point of they're coming from somewhere. Like if you seriously just materialize something, like I think the general manager at the Burger King in my town is out to get me and my family. I just materialize it, but often it does seem that there's some kind of basis. Although with the internet propagating so many of them and not always knowing where something originates on the internet, it does get pretty hard to assess. I'm willing to take your definition, a conspiracy theory being something that it's a theory, it's a proposal that you really just can't test. I wonder if anybody
Yeah,
else has any thoughts on it.
this is usually what I think of when I am I able to share my screen?
You should be allowed. I'll see if I can officially allow it. There you go.
Okay, so this is usually my favorite meme to explain a conspiracy theory. I don't know if
Oh,
anyone's ever seen this. It helps you make it's one way of making sense of the world, and it uses a lot of liberty.
this is great because when before you hopped on, me and Craig were talking about a latest Joe Rogan episode where they have Terrence Howard on, and Eric Weinstein was on. Weinstein, I'm not sure, was on with him, and he was saying you have a lot of knowledge, but you have this temperament that is prone to like hyperconnectivity, and you can connect pretty much anything you want. You if you look at these cool data points long enough, you will see Jesus's face. Like this is gonna happen. So this is a great graphic to describe this, I think.
Yeah, and I think I really like this because it implies that the person making sense of the data has an intention. There's enough creativity between for these lines that this person wanted to find this unicorn.
Mhm.
And so that's where that sort of the desire to stoke uh, fear or doubt or suspicion is usually the type of conspiracy theory that I'm sort of pointing to here. Um, I think there could be maybe variations of conspiracy theories. There could be conspiracy theories that are, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there are less malignant
For
conspiracy
sure,
theories out
because
there.
people throughout
So
time have just uncovered, negative things happening, and they probably had to look like a crazy person to suggest it to begin with. But roll the
I'd
dice.
love to apply a little bit of pressure here because in the framing of, testability as a criteria, it's conspicuous to me that the things that we test that are in the branches of science have to do with systematic insights. Whereas if you have a historical theory, if you're speculating about something particular that happened, that's not a systematic insight, it's a circumstantial insight. And all your evidence is, I don't know if it would be misleading to say it's circumstantial evidence, but I think that's probably correct usage. So the problem of definition seems challenging to me unless we want to say we should forbid people from speculating on questions that aren't about systematic behavior.
Mhm.
We should prohibit people from, or we should discourage people from speculating about what happened in history, what about specific cases. So how do we deal with this?
Mhm. I almost don't see any, reason not to at least entertain something for, you're having to do these kind of calculuses. Is that how you do the plural? That doesn't matter. Where you assess things in real time often and decide what you want to give your time to. A lot of times you just say this person maybe isn't credible. They've proven themselves to be dishonest, or to say things that don't seem to have any foundation in reality, or uh, so you could make a personal assessment, or you could say that this bucks up against other knowledge that I have that is more compelling to me, and you're having to do all of these things, and a lot of it is just how much time and energy you want to give. But I almost don't see that many reasons just not to entertain something at all, even if it's just for a little bit. Or, I
Well,
mean, the testability thing really does come into play there. Like, yes, that could be true. I mean, some of what you're saying is compelling, but I just can't test it, and so
yeah,
I'm not going to devote
it's the
myself.
reproducibility.
Mm,
Like Pizzagate, the moon landing, etc. These are all things that are, the evidence in principle could be revealed, conclusively in the direction of what the conspiracy theorists are theorizing. It's knowable in principle. Maybe the CIA comes forward and they say, here's all these documents. We did, in fact, fake all these things. This was all, right. So it's not as if we, in principle, that's a question that can't be answered. So I wonder if the distinction between speculation about something that's circumstantial and not controversial or not, let's say,
could you
it's unpopular in the mainstream narrative. You like it sounds like we're just saying a conspiracy theory is uh, a line of speculation that's implausible or it's unpopular, but that doesn't seem quite right. So I wonder if we could come up with something. I mean, I wonder if we're talking about that or if we're talking about something more specific.
Does this tie in? I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Does
you.
this tie into your impulse that there will be a pushback from religious groups when this gets brought forward? Because to me, what's going through my mind is that like, it's the implication of the conspiracy theory that would make people react a certain way because it tests your faith. So like all those things are like all those suggestions or theories are really testing your faith. Like your faith in the government or your faith in this or faith in that. But I don't know. I mean that like even all the different like doctrines within Christianity, like annihilationism, like universalism, Calvinism, like they're all kind of drawn from different scriptures here and there, but they're all kind of theories. Like nobody has proof. And then when one gets brought into your wheelhouse, it just can kind of like shake your faith. So that's I don't know, that's what's going through my mind hearing you talk about this.
Yeah, that's like in the name of the rose, Craig. When at the end he's saying, I don't want there to be I can't spoil it, sorry. Okay, forget I said that, but let's say there was someone who was out there trying to aestheticize doubt. This would be problematic. And conspiracy theory does that, really. It like makes doubt appealing. It makes you look for it. It trains your mind to look for it everywhere
Yeah.
you go. So that's kind of a good insight there, Jason.
Wow.
But even with that, I mean, doesn't that make you just find a further foundation? Like if Robert's going to bring this ideas to the church, I would have the same impulse Craig would, that most people get mad. Because you can even bring up ideas of like, hey, it might not have been a literal 6 days to certain people, and some people lose it because it shakes up they're they don't know how to react to it because it's just unstable for them. But then like with that doubt, you throw them in a whirlpool of doubt, and it's like just go down and then you'll find the rock bottom or something, like I
Well,
mean, I think all of us here are probably pretty comfortable with like if someone came out and said, hey, there's definitely aliens. Like I don't think anybody would. That, I guess what I'm saying is the implications of that, especially in a religious context, are like, what does that do with even the concept of salvation or redemption or anything like that? Now there's like all these other strands of creation that are unaccounted for that are now just flooding in, and it's like, is that gonna just completely shatter your world, or do you have some sort of like bedrock that's actually stable where that those things don't really even matter, like you can just kind of flow through those ideas in and out, and whether they're true or not, it's like it doesn't make a difference. So I mean, I would almost think the doubt is a utility in some way, but could be destructive.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think doubt's inevitable, but I don't think it's something to court. Well, anyways, I think maybe what Robert's going for is to urge people back towards things that are foundational and away from things that are wind of doctrine, that are just kind of in the air and of temptation, but don't have much substance. I think if the pushes away from conspiracy theories, it makes more and more sense to me. I mean, there's a degree in which you shouldn't. It's because they're weaponized so much, probably too. A single conspiracy theory can wield a lot of control for someone who's trying to head up an outfit or a faction. Oh, if you also, oh yes, blow up, go to ribbons. It's can be very, very effective and very, very dangerous. But if you say, yeah, if you say I can doubt this one thing, if that thing is fractured, then why can't everything else be fractured? I don't know if that's what's behind your push to stay away from conspiracy theories, but it's what it's making me think of.
So I can get to that. I do want to kind of stay on Craig's question of like, can we really pin down what it is we're kind of looking at here? Because then I can maybe better answer your thoughts, Mitch, about why why discourage conspiratorial thinking. Yeah, Craig. Yeah, we still haven't really answered your question about like what it is. What is a conspiracy theory, right?
That's somewhat true. I really liked what Jason said. You know,
Can you
Jason, it sounded
summarize
like
it?
my summary of what Jason said is that a conspiracy theory is something that undermines faith in our institutions. Jason,
Yeah.
is that fair?
Yeah,
Well, let
basically, yeah, I
me
think that's kind of what I would think.
push back a little more because I'm okay with the fact if we're not taking this statement at just face value. Like we know what a conspiracy is, we know what a theory is. You put those together
Yeah.
and make a meaning out of them. Does it have to be again something that's negatively connoted? Is it intended to undermine always, or can it be just a suspicion that you know? Surely it's not merely a suspicion, but if you have a theory as to something going on, I think we're going to need to piecemeal together. I think there is something about the inability to test it through normal means, or that it's not reproducible. I think there's something about it undermining your faith in institutions. Uh, but I still don't think
Here,
we've
here might
completed the
be
picture.
this might be a good historical example to mine to see whether or not it was or helps us see conspiracy theories more clearly. I'm thinking of Galileo introducing the theory of heliocentrism to the church at the time. And I imagine that that was a moment of an alternative explanation, challenging the institution, giving doubt. We now know that that was not a made up theory. It was reproducible. It was verifiable.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
whether it's right or wrong, it's something that problematizes the accepted narrative.
and maybe that is where introducing doubt, fear, suspicion is the alternative theory does create some problems for the accepted narrative. And now, as sort of the theorizer, I could want to create problems for the established institution. Those reasons may be valid or they may be invalid. It isn't unlike humans to want to create problems for the things that they don't like.
And I can even imagine their intention not being to problematize, but the effect always being to problematize. If they just wanted the truth, they could have this conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so there is an element of like what's the intention of the theorizer, because it can be malicious. But there also can be sort of benevolent theorizers that get cast as conspiracy theorists. Craig, what are you thinking about all this?
Well, my intuition is that it's very rare that somebody, you know, forms a hypothesis and disseminates it just to be destructive, not because they actually find it plausible. I'd say in almost all cases, it seems intuitive to me that they find their theory very plausible.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too, because even I mean, I actually like the unicorn on the graphic, of course, but because that trying to think of how to say this, like that the person who sees a unicorn, I think there's validity to that as well. Like you guys were talking about, was that guy Terrence, how he's seeing all this stuff and pulling all these things in. And was there that theory about like the lizard people or something like that? There's even this theory about lizard people, but it's like if you pause and so I think people that see that are seeing it repeatedly a lot of times, and they're trying to be honest. And it may seem absolutely delusional because they may just, I don't know, something wired different. But even like that whole lizard people thing, I mean, if you just pause and frame it in a symbolic way, it's like, well, yeah, that's like, I can see how people would think that. Like
But you
these
can
elites in
steel man
society.
anything, can't you? But it doesn't mean that it's helpful.
Yeah,
Uh, there's a bright side. There's a nice way to look at almost anything, and there's an extent to which we might do that to our own detriment.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right on that.
I don't know if I'm right on that, but
I'm just trying to steel man you.
well, you and I have this ongoing kind of conversation. I think it's
Yeah.
informing my response to what you just said.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think that's right to have caution. But I guess what I was kind of getting at is like I don't know that you should just like kind of having that knee-jerk reaction to just throw it out completely, like Robert was saying.
Yeah,
Because even
I
like
agree.
the
Entertain
flat
everything.
Earth stuff or whatever, like when those theories were coming up, it just sounds absurd where we are at now. But then, it's like people like what Jonathan Peugeot talks about, like people experience the world as flat. Like that's your experience of it. It's very flat, linear. You don't walk on a curve. And so it's like I don't know. I just feel like to just completely ignore it, even though it seems extremely outlandish, is kind of like when someone's seeing the unicorn, it's like I don't know. Just like I just pause for a second and be like, what's going on
Yeah,
here?
give it the time of day. I think that's a good move, but you have to
But
always have wisdom as to how much time and energy you're going to give it, and
yeah,
the time and energy that you give it has consequences.
and the thing too is like, I mean, to your point, I guess maybe there's probably like filters for it because, like I said, I mean, like yeah, because getting back to that, just bringing a conspiracy into a community can completely like I don't know if there's certain people that can filter that and give it the time of day better than other people because it could just destabilize like the whole community. Like if you're bringing something into a church and then like a crazy theory, like it may probably make everybody mad, and then who knows if it would just kind of like you're talking about kind of weirdly destroy the thing, and that wasn't necessarily your intention. You weren't trying to be destructive. You were just trying to um, build on something when it just seemed like and then it comes across as you were trying to tear it down.
Yeah, what Craig was saying about how he didn't think that people tended to, think it was implausible what they were saying and that they were using it for malicious ways. The pause that I had on that is I do think a lot of people wield conspiracy theories as a means to control people. And so, when people come across a conspiracy theory, It's a Wonderful Life, you guys have seen this movie? Towards the beginning, he thinks that the pharmacist has accidentally put the wrong pills in the bottle, and he sees this advertisement and it says, "Go ask Dad, he'll know." And so he runs to ask his dad. Well, that's what everybody's doing when they come across something that they have questions about. They're going to their leader, and if their leader is someone who just wants to have power and control, he may take advantage of that theory and use it to I don't know. I think maybe like an Alec Jones. If someone sees an advertisement that says "Go ask Dad, he'll know," and they go to Alec Jones. Alex.
So, I have a question for you, Robert, as well. And I'm sorry because I haven't been. It's been a crazy week. I haven't been keeping up with the chat as much, so I don't want to derail this too much. But what's your I guess impulse or you feel the desire to bring these things to the more like into the church realm, religious groups? Is it because you think it's just being completely ignored to a detriment, and you find the facts compelling?
So I think this is an opportunity for my church to come together and explore new topics. So this is part of a summer lecture series, and this is the second year that we've done this. And this is an idea or a series of ideas that I've been sort of working on casually for the last couple of years, and I finally found some time away from being a dad, and I went to a bar and grabbed a drink and said, I'm going to put it all down and I'm going to talk to my pastor about it. And so really it's just a way that I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
So there isn't this like huge, um, there isn't this huge onus or obligation or sense that I need to bring this. It's more of, I think that there's something here that a lot of people could enjoy, but also give them room to think about how they engage with information in their world. And it might actually help them to think more clearly the next time they hear something about aliens. And so yeah, because I think I've had friends send me BuzzFeed or the Blaze news articles where it's like Mexican scientists unveil alien autopsy, and it's like, dude, what do you think about this? And I just kind of have to sort of like break it down that like, yeah, if they do have and it's like some story about some mummified remains of some weird looking humanoid from South America. And I was like, well, there's things called genetic mutations, and children can be born looking very, very different from their parents. And that could really confuse native peoples in that region so much that they want to preserve it. And lo and behold, some anthropologists sort of hunting around in their burial grounds finds said thing and immediately associates it with aliens. Well, there are other explanations for that, and so I think I've had those interactions, and I kind of feel like a downer, and I kind of want to like introduce a way of like both. Here's the really beautiful things that science has found about the possibilities that aliens could exist, but then when it comes to actually like saying that some nefarious actors are hiding the truth from us, which is usually like sort of the dominant narrative around aliens, is like the truth is out there. I think that was like the title or the subtitle for the X-Files. And
So
I
you
went,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. I'm rambling too much, but I want to push back to that idea that there's that somehow that there's something more out there and that it's being hidden from us. So I really want to push back against esotericism, that the truth is being hidden from us, that there's a better reality that we don't have available to us. I think those are all premises. Those are Christian premises that can be, or those are premises that the Christian worldview actually needs to push back against. That somehow a better reality is being hidden from us, that the truth is out there, it's not here. I think a Christian worldview would put forward that the truth is here and it's in Jesus Christ, and the better reality is in Him and in seeking His kingdom. And so I think all of those other sort of ideas or notions actually are challenging the Christian worldview, and that those don't get discussed when a BuzzFeed article comes out about some random scientists wanting to get publicity or wanting to share their discovery of this uh, deformed child from 500 years ago.
That intrigues me because you have a worldview where you have these kind of ontological claims that are not evidence-based. And so it seems intuitive that, that tradition would be disposed to, ontological elements that aren't, that are likewise not evidence-based.
Yeah, but that is very intriguing. I like that you bring up that kind of double. It almost seems like a double standard. But I think I guess what was running through my head was that if it's one thing if you consider a deformed child or something that was discovered. If it's an actual alien that they've uncovered, then with the Christian narrative, it's like, well, did Christ die for this? And then how does that fit in? It's like, did he die for just people, or did he die for all creation? Did he die for aliens? Did he die for angels? Like, what do you do with all these things, all these unaccounted things?
Craig, could you repeat your question or your statement? I want to make sure that I understood it.
Sure. It sounded like you said we should discourage esotericism or
Or
claims about, right. we should discourage claims about, ontological objects that are not, at the accessible with evidence, and or but it seems to me, does it seem challenging to you the way it does to me, that when you try to reach into the Christian toolbox, you you find more esotericism?
So I think that, yeah, I think that this probably requires like a definition of what I mean or what we mean by esotericism. So in the conspiracy theories that we're talking about, their claim is that the evidence is being hidden from us. And so that the evidence does actually exist, but it's being hidden, and that by nefarious actors. I would say in the Christian worldview that the evidence is not actually being said to have existed other than via faith. And so the faith element comes in as being you're going to have to believe this without evidence. And so that's where I think the difference between conspiracy theories and the worldview that they try to create is one that evidence does exist, but it's been hidden from you. The Christian worldview is the evidence can only be experienced through not the evidence, the promise is evidenced through faith. Is that making sense in my mind? I don't know.
The distinction you're making sounds pretty good. The verse one, being hidden versus another that's on offer, so to speak. I do think a lot of Christians would, in one manner of thinking or another, maybe dispute the claim that their beliefs aren't evidence based. They may not be an evidence that would be admissible in a laboratory or a court of law or something. But I think everyone kind of has an evidence on offer when they want to talk about why they believe what they believe in the Christian faith.
What are you thinking now, Craig?
Well, I recognize you drawing a distinction between things in the Christian ontology like angels, demons, heaven, hell, etc. Like there's all these ontological claims of things that are, you could say imperceptible in principle, maybe, but I'm not sure where we can draw from if we want to say speculation about things that are not accessible to evidence or not accessible, to perception.
Can you give an example?
Well, let's say that I have some speculative theory, and I say there is this, there are these invisible creatures, and they're going around, and they're, they're causing harm, and they're kind of orchestrating chaos, and to me, it sounds. I'm wondering where we can, as if you're a Christian person, and you want to discourage this kind of hypothesizing. Let's say it's aliens that I'm talking about. I'm like, they're here. They just have technology that confounds our equipment, and they can't be detected because they're too advanced. It seems not a million miles away from the ontological claims of Christianity. So I'm not sure where we can draw from to prohibit that kind of thinking or that kind of speculating.
Can you think of a claim of Christianity that isn't substantiated by some kind of perceived evidence?
Wait, what? Okay, can you ask that again?
I was just asking if Craig could think of a claim of Christianity that wasn't substantiated by perceived evidence.
I mean, take the claim of the existence of angels and demons.
My understanding of the existence of angels and demons is that there are perceived accounts of both entities that are on record.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to Steelman here, Greg's point, it's
Still man
just
mine.
well,
I'm just kidding.
Craig's making the point, like, if someone's going around saying, hey, these aliens exist, it's basically the same as claiming the gospel as he is risen. Like, there's nothing, I mean, because there's plenty of evidence that people have seen aliens, as much as Paul seeing Christ knock him off his horse in the vision. Like, people see visions, but people have seen aliens in visions, and there's been so many accounts of that. And people have tried to, it's been replicated circumstantially, and that people have tried to replicate it systematically, even through stuff like hypnosis. And I think they've been successful doing that. And like ayahuasca trips, all that stuff, where they see aliens. I mean, what's that, a DMT where they see the little creatures? So it's like these things are repeatable, and these people probably feel like, to Robert's point, like they're saying these things are being hidden from us. We need to proclaim this weird gospel or something like that. And so it's kind of is. I see Craig's point is like, coming from a Christian perspective, you kind of have to just sort of step into this realm of double standard, or kind of a willing, almost like a willing blind eye or hypocrisy or something, to be like, I'm going to stick with this type of evidence, but this that kind of has similar evidence, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
like
that's a
completely
great
reject.
deal, man. That seems like, oh man, I don't. So I actually wanted to ask Robert about this, and I don't want to get too off subject. So let's see if it's analogous at all. But I mean, this is something that people do practice. They do shield you from or steer you away from certain information in the interest of keeping you within the confines of truth. And I wanted to ask Robert this, and if it doesn't seem to relate, or if you want to bounce back, then you can. But you said in the beginning, Robert, that you had with part of the thing that spurred you choosing this as the lecture was, with your class, and also that it was in conversation with current events in recent history. And I assume part of that was like the declassification of all the CIA stuff. Well, that's maybe an example. They've said, okay, we need to keep this nation on course. We need to keep them focused on things matter. We can't have them getting into a frenzy. And so I wonder if there is some, oh, this is rocky ground, but I wonder if there's some, benefit to shielding people from certain narratives that are off. You don't want to say from truth though, so that's probably not a good analogy. But do with any of that what you will, including disregard it.
Thanks. Yeah, I still want to stick with Craig's observation, because I think it's really helping to refine the way I'm framing this suggestion or discouragement of conspiracy theories, because I don't want to be a hypocrite and say discourage one thing when I'm turning around and saying, but you should do the same thing, but just change the language. That's what I'm hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Craig. So yeah, Craig, help me out. How do I make this? How do I think through? Keep describing it as you're seeing it, and I will continue to think
Well,
through
I
it with
like
you.
what I like what everybody said, and I feel like you know I feel like everybody made the point I was making stronger than I did. So
Maybe you just have to do it. Maybe you just have to. What Jason was saying is you kind of just have to align. Like you just say, this is what I believe is true, and because of that, I'm going to tell you that other things are false and to stay away from them, or that other things are unhelpful and to stay away from them. I mean, maybe that's just part of life.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that is Mitch correct, in the sense that if someone believes in a Christian view and they want to continue believing a Christian worldview, they probably shouldn't delve into conspiracy theories, because they might stop them from believing a Christian worldview.
Yeah,
And
don't
now,
flagellate your faith. And it can take it, but hey, why?
yeah, I mean, I think there might be some things that faith can't endure. And if one walks willingly into it, is it possible to expose oneself to things that will destroy their faith?
I always say everything is deconstructible, and that of course includes the truth. Yeah, there's a way to compromise it with logic games, and I don't think there's anything that withstands the limited scope of human logic point blank.
Okay. Okay, we'll let this one sit, Craig, if you're content.
Can I speak from the
Uh,
shadows?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
jump in. Hey,
Show
Robert.
yourself.
Good to
Oh,
see
I
you,
I want to know
can't.
what
Stephen.
you're
I'm just.
blocking out.
I
Why are
was
you
trying
veiled
not
right
to.
now?
I don't know. I'm trying to hide this from all of you guys. No, I was just trying. I didn't want to speak very much because I was just trying to listen and catch up. Um, then yeah, I like Craig's point's really interesting, but I think I wonder if one difference from what I've gathered so far, uh, is that there's a point at which the way that aliens get described sometimes in conspiracy theories are indistinguishable from like how you would describe a demon, um, or an angel. I mean, depending on how the person's experience with it is. Um, I think that's really interesting that you have this like we have a loss of one category and the creation of another one, um, where if people are having like encounters or something, if people have like I've experienced, an encounter with an angel or with a demon, and then also other people are like I've encountered, you know, good aliens and bad aliens. Um, I think that's also an interesting like observation to make, where I think it's not that like angels good, aliens bad, or like it's okay to believe in demons but not in aliens, but more like I think we've created secular categories for like previously like religious experiences potentially, and that can go one of two directions, and that's also distinct from like finding intelligent life on another planet versus people having like these very strange spiritual like or like, it's one thing to be like, hey, there's some people that came here or some creatures that came here from another planet and we're all hanging out with them, or we're interacting with them, versus like my friend got abducted and had this horrific experiences and has PTSD from this or something, um, where that would previously be described as like an encounter with like a malevolent spirit or something, which is certainly not uncommon in history. I just wonder like if our categories are like it's not okay to like encounter a demon, but like it's more acceptable now to be like, yeah, aliens, man. Um, and I think there's even like two ways of talking about aliens, which is like, hey, there's a weird aircraft, or like I personally was abducted and had this horrible experience, um, or a great experience. I don't know, but I just wonder if it's like maybe even a Christian account accounts for those better than a non-Christian account does, and it's not like should I or should I not believe in aliens slash supernatural entities, but like more, do I even have a framework for accounting for that? And if I don't have a Christian framework, like those are now the most powerful beings in the world for me or in the universe for me. And my relationship to them is very different than if I'm a Christian. And I think to me, that seems the difference. Not like I should believe it's okay to believe in demons and angels and not okay to believe in aliens, but more like these categories seem very overlapping in some descriptions of them. And there seems to be very different ways of talking about extraterrestrial life as like weird spiritual encounters versus like objective off planet life or something that we are, like you'd find a weird creature on Earth that you'd never seen before, versus like which would seem like very kind of paranormal experiences that people have. I don't know. Those are just thoughts that went through my head, but like we recede back into the darkness. But
Category shift is a good one. You also hear a lot with the explanations for, because people don't want to do maybe the spiritual route anymore, and they're either the alien thing still seems too far out there, and a lot of times alien abduction stories that seem credible, like this person is going to pass a lie detector test, so to speak, and they'll talk about them in terms of a way of verbalizing about trauma that they experienced, abuse as children or otherwise. So it's interesting the different categories that can pop up to explain one thing.
I'd say like similarly, Christians are called, even though we do believe in like just part of the faith in the experience of a Christian is to believe that angels and demons exist, and they also have they have influence on things that happen. They're not all powerful and aren't controlling everything, but they're obviously like there's a general belief that they are influencing things in ways that we can and can't understand. But we're also admonished as Christians not to like become obsessed with those. And so I feel like that's maybe similar to the attack of our approach to aliens as well. Like it's not like it's okay if it's if it's spiritual and not okay if it's aliens. And more like actually in general we're supposed to be critical about all this anyway, and be like sober minded about it, and not even discount it right away, because it's like, yeah, maybe
Sober minded.
God's world is very, very strange. So
I feel like that's the intention of the lecture piece, Stephen. So I appreciate that you are pointing that out. I do also just really value some of these sort of pushbacks or questions, or, well, what about this? Because I think that those are exactly what like an audience will be coming at it with. So I appreciate you as sort of like validating like the intention of the lecture does seem to be valid, to I mean, what sober minded, as Mitch was saying, towards this. And but I think that there is a depth here to some of these aspects that is really, really helpful. So I appreciate what you all are sharing.
When Craig was first, telling us about this, that you were doing this, he had posed a question as to whether or not Christians were more apt to believe in conspiracy theories. And my thought was that, yeah, maybe, probably, because they're more apt to believe in things that other people would scoff at. But also, I think like the Christian that I would most respect is not someone who would be too given to, an obsession, Stephen said, with conspiracy theories. Or the attraction to conspiracy theories does strike me as like a red, or at least a yellow flag. It seems like a poor use of time and energy and interest. I'm not sure what it says about me, for instance, that I'm interested in conspiracy theories, but I don't think it's great. I'm a little embarrassed to admit.
I'm glad you said that. I'll tell you what that's reminding me of, and let me take a route through something that Jason and Stephen both said, which is that there's a way where one answer to this question of how to treat conspiracy theories is to be very affirming and say, right, we live in a fallen world. We live, in a world with Satan and his fallen angels, and they're orchestrating chaos and malevolence nonstop. So certainly there are conspiracies going on. Now, Mitch, the distinction, or a question that you kind of raised implicitly, I thought, was, what is my role in addressing it? What is my responsibility as a Christian person to clean up the mess, so to speak, and uncover the truth? And this is kind of like the tension you see, between people who feel that they have an obligation to treat the planet well and to live sustainably, versus those who say, well, God's going to come and he's going to clean up the mess, so don't worry about it. He's going to pick up the check, and it's all going to be swept clean. So I don't have an obligation. It's not my obligation to participate in the restoration. And I sense that that's a kind of unresolved tension in the Christian worldview, and I wonder if the comparison is actually applicable.
Craig, can I just repeat back to make sure I understand? You think that the unresolved response to uh, caring for the environment, or the question of the environment for Christians, is similar to the question of what to do about Satan and his forces acting in malicious ways in the world, stirring up. They are a conspiracy. Like the narrative in Scripture basically types Satan and his actors as conspirators, and so it exists in there. How do we respond to that?
Perfect summary.
You know, keeping it somewhat personal to try to answer, it seems like it's always going to be a matter of priority. It's how what do you do? Someone who sees conspiracy theories as a problem, you may do better not to individually go and strangle squeeze each one with facts and logic, but to become themselves and to help others to become by example, and by teaching and training and correcting and rebuking, to help them to become the type of person who isn't worried or but is instead someone who is, because back to the whether or not you could test it, I mean, there are so many things that we do know, and that we do know that are obviously good. There are a series of things against which there are no law. There's a religion that God sees as pure, and we know these things. They're like laid out and listed, and so better to, and this is just the pragmatist in me that's always rearing its head for better and worse, but just better to give yourself to the things that you know, because you can spend your whole life participating in the things you know to be good and true, and you'll never exhaust that route. I mean, you'll never get to the end of it. And so I think the person doesn't need to line up a plan of attack for every conspiracy theory and the endless conspiracy theories, but to instead become the type of person who is not put off by them, is not obsessed by them, is not led by them, but is instead led by the things that they know to be true and good.
So I think my conversation with my pastor today could help, not help, but basically describe, I think, where I'm sitting on this. He talked about how prior to the Enlightenment and the Reformation, the church was a lot more comfortable with mystery, and that the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution came along, or well, Protestantism came and sort of carried the same wave of the scientific revolution as kind of wanting or needing an explanation for everything. And these types of topics that we're talking about clearly don't have great explanations. And so there's sort of a shunning or a distance between them and us. And at least our emphasis tonight has been on, can we explain this, or do we have testable evidence? Like, we've laden this entire conversation as sort of modernist Western thinkers. And so the fact that you sort of highlight, Craig, this question of, in scripture, what do we do with Satan and his conspirators, or what do we do with the environment? I think the church before the Reformation, or the early church and the church fathers, might have been very comfortable with the ambiguity and the indecision of those questions. And today, I think we've become accustomed to needing answers. And I think that that's like not being comfortable with unanswered questions. We're uncomfortable with unanswered questions. And I think that's actually where conspiracy theories sort of find their footing, is that I think a conspiracy theory is actually an attempt to like at least point to some alternative answer. And he talked about how like the sin in the garden was not an attempt to, like what Mitch was saying, to like to enjoy what you have, but was actually an attempt to get behind God and to be like God, or an attempt to thwart or step aside from God's limitations. But there's actually freedom in the limitations that God had set in the garden. And so I think I see conspiracy theories as sort of playing out this human need for explanation, for the things that are very, very difficult or maybe even impossible for us to explain.
You're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because I know a big criticism for Christians is that they're too comfortable with not having answers, and that there's this constant appeal to mystery. Like, I guess one really can't win in this life.
Well, with kind of going back to what Steven said, when you have these mysteries on both sides that are kind of, you can't really pull on physical evidence. Or I mean, I guess you could argue that there's probably some, but not enough. But there, so going back to Steven's point, where like you can kind of, what was the term he used? Like a shifting of categories, or like you could synthesize these categories. Because I mean, I've listened to countless things where people talk about how the jinn are similar to fairies, how that's similar to UFOs. Like there's all these, you kind of, there's a weird way they kind of all blend together. So you can kind of synthesize them and account for them all within your frame, even with angels and demons. Like, I mean, that was basically the simple conclusion of why I believe in fairies. Because I'm like, well, I believe in angels and demons. Why wouldn't I believe in fairies? Like it just like so. But you can put them in. So I mean, you can account for these things and kind of bring them into different categories within your worldview. Is that opens up? I think, like you're saying, to some people, I guess that would be a scarier world. To some people, that would be a more beautiful world, because they'd get to see more of it. It would open up like a greater spectrum of things to believe in, and even have faith in, and mysteries to kind of just to let be, or to explore. But is there, I guess that's my question too, like is that, I guess that would be the question, is that useful for everyone? Is that a useful tool? Is it useful to synthesize these? Because I think you could easily start talking about aliens and go through those. Honestly, it's just, I mean, it is evidence. It's may just be like circumstantial evidence, but you could go through probably account after account of like, oh, here's the grays, these aliens, these like look like little demons, like these are this or that. Like you go through all this stuff and like synthesize all these things and make, but it's like, I don't know. Is that
Taxonomy.
useful? Yeah.
I tell you that that's evidence stuff. It doesn't matter what you provide. I feel like if you made up your mind about something, you'll pretty much find a way to translate the evidence into something that already fits with your worldview. So that can be a problem for pretty much everybody who cares about the truth. But people talk about. I mean, what you when the CIA released all their stuff, it's like nobody cared. Nobody cares. Like you can, if somebody, I mean, there's just, I don't know what evidence would be compelling enough. I really don't. I feel like if you showed the clearest footage in the world, it would be doctored, it would be computer generated. Yeah, I feel like if you bumped into one, you would have been having hallucinogenic vision. What evidence? I don't know. It's interesting why people believe things at all. It's a miracle that people believe things at all.
So I'll jump in and ask to do something that I usually like to conclude my conversations with. It's called a debrief. I don't know if you guys do this, but
My pants are staying on, dude.
sure. Yeah, we just go around the Zoom call and just say what you're walking away with. Because I've got like 7 more minutes and then I need to hit the bed. But yeah, I'll start. I think I'm just walking away with humility to have so many people give me their time to consider these ideas with me. So very thankful, very challenged. It makes me be very careful with my words, and so I think that was always the intention when I lectured to my students, was that I was very careful with what I told them, and that this conversation and other conversations is reminding me of that uh, value when I go into my lectures, that I'll just be very careful, even though I do want to have fun. I don't want to be careless with my words because it could cause someone to doubt in a way that I don't intend, or it could cause someone to react in a way that I hadn't intended. And even if they do react in ways that I didn't intend, I'll know that I was true to what I said, and I can accept them for who they are. But if I'm careless with my words, then they're reacting to my carelessness, and that is something that I don't hope for. I would want them to react out of my care and love in my words. So I'll be thinking a lot more about this, and I really appreciate that because I'd kind of hit a lull with this, and so this has given me a lot to return to when I look at the document again.
Well, call me superstitious, but I think the spirit will lead you, and I think it's awesome you're doing this lecture for your church. Um, I would say my takeaway is it's still loading, but in development model for approaching conspiracy theories. You author gave me a lot of food for thought.
Should go next. Let Craig end it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway is probably, are you going or me?
How about I'll go
Am I
first
frozen
because I
again?
think
Okay.
no, I'm just frozen psychologically. I'll go first. You finish. Well, I will tell you, I notice in my own perspective as we had this conversation, I have a lot of hesitation to place my feet firmly in a specific tradition or even in scientism, if you can call it that, the kind of science worldview. And I'm interested in it. I'm interested in what a harmonious combination of things that seem plausible to me are, that seem incompatible. I really appreciated everybody's thoughts, and um, there's a lot that happened that I didn't process quickly enough to appreciate entirely at the time. So I'll, I'll, I'll be going back and listening to this again, I think.
gonna have to have the last word. So how this goes. No, I think I mean I think I'm kind of with all of you guys on that, but I think it's still, like Mitch said, it's still processing, loading. So I'm sure I'll get more thinking about it later. But yeah, I appreciate the I guess everything that's brought up and kind of the idea of just thinking about the utility of conspiracy theories and when to engage them and how much to engage them, and how to do it sober-mindedly, Stephen said. 'Cause that I think that's always a challenge, because even in the crazy conspiracy theories or the ones that seem more crazy, it's like, so I mean, even all the hypotheses within like any system or institution or religious frame are all kind of theories, and it's, well, and I shouldn't say all theories, but it's just like when to press those, when to speak, when to keep silent, things like that. Yeah, and how do you even to, because if the intention is to seek truth, you're gonna have to broaden your horizon, kind of open up theories, or their conspiracy theories, and then how to like Rob was talking about, it's gonna take some thought to sit there with that, but how to do that in a way that doesn't come across as like being destructive, or like, and trying to be really, yeah, I don't know the right words. So
Jason,
Thanks
have
to
you been
everybody.
Have you been
Go ahead.
listening with someone, Jason? Is
But
someone
what?
is there
Oh
someone
yeah,
there with you? Would they like to give any last words or thoughts?
no, she says no.
Okay, sounds good.
Shaking her fists. Yeah, no. But yeah, oh yeah, I don't know if you saw, I got attacked by an alien earlier. I think you were up, Robert. I don't know if you guys know what a Dobson fly is, but it's horrific. And I smashed it, and it was like on the ground, like lifting. It was trying to bite me still. So then I moved it, and it started crawling at me.
It's
It was
not your
like
first run-in with the Dobson fly.
no, they're like the size of bats too. And I smashed it probably like 5 times, and it wouldn't die. It was terrifying. And also, there's weird mice falling on the tin roof here. Like literally, we've been sitting out here, and I'll hear something hit the roof, and then this mouse will like run down the tree.
Well, an injury from an alien is considered a close encounter of the fifth kind. Is it the? I actually think it's called the. What kind of fly did you say that was?
Dobson.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Well, this
Sorry.
was amazing. I appreciate seeing you all. Craig, thanks for getting us together. This was wonderful.
Thanks,
I'd love to do
Robert.
it way more
Enjoyed
often.
it.
Okay.
Robert, I have to ask you, is there going to be a recording of the lecture after it happens?
Possibly, I will drop it in the chat if it is.
That would be amazing.
There's starting to be enough there's starting to maybe be too many mentionings of me and aliens on the internet, so I might have to tone it down after this. Go into
Retreat to the
the
shadows.
let the search engine optimization dwindle down so I don't get too much attention.
Well, you can rest assured that any appearance on Jason's YouTube channel is a guarantee of obscurity for your entire life.
Well, I had to give it a little bit of a breather after the cubic planets.
Yeah, I still want to revisit that. Why
Square
aren't
planets
planets square?
is shorthand for great question.
Yeah. Awesome. Good to see you guys.
It's
You
good to
too.
see you there.
Bye.
Yeah.